Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Anna. Today I have a new story for you, called The Marathon. It's about a man who decides, almost by accident, to completely change his life, and what it actually takes to keep a promise to yourself. As always, just relax and listen, and let's begin. David Chen was 38 years old, and for the last 12 years, he had worked as an accountant at a mid-sized company downtown. His days followed a predictable pattern: wake up, drive to work, sit at a desk for 8 or 9 hours, drive home, eat dinner in front of the television, and go to bed, only to repeat the same routine the next day. He wasn't unhappy with his job exactly, but somewhere along the way, he had also stopped paying much attention to his own health. He rarely exercised. He ate whatever was convenient, usually fast food during his lunch break. Over the years, he had slowly gained weight, without really noticing it happening, the way these things often happen gradually rather than all at once. Everything changed on an ordinary Tuesday morning, during his annual health checkup. His doctor, a serious but kind woman named Dr. Patel, looked at his test results with a concerned expression. "David," she said, "your blood pressure is higher than I'd like, and your cholesterol levels have increased again since last year. I'm not going to lecture you, but I do need to be honest. If you don't make some changes soon, you're heading towards some serious health problems in the next 5 to 10 years. Heart disease, possibly diabetes. These are not small risks." David sat quietly, absorbing the news. He had expected some kind of warning, deep down, but hearing it said so directly still shocked him. "What kind of changes?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Nothing extreme," Dr. Patel said. "You don't need to become an athlete overnight. But you need to move your body regularly, improve your diet, and generally take your health more seriously. Even walking regularly would make a real difference." David left the doctor's office feeling shaken. That evening, sitting on his couch, eating dinner in front of the television as usual, he found himself thinking differently about his life than he had in years. He thought about his father, who had passed away from a heart attack at 62, only a few years older than David would be in one more decade if nothing changed. He thought about how tired he always felt, how he avoided the stairs at work whenever possible, how even a short walk left him breathing heavily. That night, instead of turning on the television after dinner, David searched online for beginner exercise programs. Almost randomly, he came across an article about people who had successfully trained for their first marathon later in life, some of them starting from a similarly unhealthy place as David currently found himself. Something about the idea struck him deeply. A marathon felt impossibly far away from his current reality, completely unrealistic given how out of shape he currently was. But somehow, that exact impossibility also made it appealing. If he could achieve something so difficult, so far beyond his current abilities, maybe it would prove to himself that real change was actually possible. The next morning, without telling anyone his real plan yet, David woke up 30 minutes earlier than usual and put on an old pair of sneakers he found at the back of his closet, and used for years. He stepped outside and attempted to run around his neighborhood block, a distance that would normally take a fit person only a few minutes to complete. David lasted less than 2 minutes before he had to stop completely, bent over, breathing heavily, his heart pounding uncomfortably in his chest. He felt embarrassed even though nobody was watching him at 6:30 in the morning. He walked the rest of the way home, disappointed in himself, wondering if this whole marathon idea had been a foolish, unrealistic fantasy. But that evening, remembering Dr. Patel's serious expression, and remembering his father, David decided to try again the next morning. And the morning after that. Slowly, very slowly, he began to build a simple routine, walking briskly for 20 minutes each morning during the first week, gradually adding small periods of slow jogging during the second week, always uncomfortable, always slightly embarrassing, but always, technically, an improvement from where he had started. After about a month of this new routine, David decided to make his plan more official. He signed up for a local marathon happening in 10 months, a popular annual event in his city that attracted thousands of runners, from serious athletes to complete beginners like himself. Registering felt terrifying, almost like publicly admitting a secret ambition he barely believed in himself. But once he had paid the registration fee, there was no going back easily, which was exactly the kind of pressure David felt he needed. He also decided to join a local running club he had found online, specifically designed for beginners training for their first long-distance race. The club met every Saturday morning in a large park near the city center, led by an experienced running coach named Marcus, a cheerful man in his 50s who had completed over 20 marathons himself. David's first Saturday with the running club was humbling. Almost everyone else in the beginner group seemed to be at least a little more capable than him, able to run slightly longer distances without stopping, moving with slightly better form. David struggled to keep up, often falling behind the main group, occasionally needing to walk when others continued jogging. He felt embarrassed, seriously considering quitting after that very first session. But Marcus approached him after the group run finished, noticing David sitting alone on a park bench, looking discouraged. "First time is always the hardest," Marcus said, sitting down next to him. "Everyone in that group started exactly where you are now, David. Some of them just started a little earlier than you did, that's all. The only real difference between someone who finishes a marathon and someone who doesn't isn't natural talent. It's simply whether they keep showing up, week after week, even when it's difficult." "I don't know," David admitted. "Everyone else seemed so much better than me today." "Focus on your own progress, not their progress," Marcus said firmly. 10 months from now, compare yourself to the David sitting on this bench right now, not to anyone else in that group. That's the only comparison that actually matters." David thought about Marcus's words the whole way home, and despite his embarrassment, he decided to return the following Saturday. And the Saturday after that. Slowly, over the following weeks, something began to shift. His 20-minute walks became 30-minute light jogs. His breathing became less labored during exercise. He started sleeping better at night, and noticed, with some surprise, that he felt less tired during his workday too. Around the 2-month mark, David also started paying closer attention to his diet, following some simple advice from Marcus and a few other members of the running club. He began cooking more meals at home instead of relying on fast food, adding more vegetables, reducing sugary drinks, though he never became extremely strict about it, since Marcus always emphasized sustainable, gradual changes over extreme, unrealistic ones. Marathon training isn't about perfection, Marcus often reminded the beginner group. It's about consistency. Showing up regularly, even imperfectly, beats occasional perfect performances every single time. During these early months, David also began forming genuine friendships within the running club, something he hadn't expected when he first signed up. He became close with a woman named Elena, a nurse in her early 30s who was training for her second marathon, having successfully completed her first the previous year despite starting from a similarly difficult position as David. Elena often ran alongside David during the group sessions, offering encouragement, sharing practical advice about pacing, hydration, and dealing with the inevitable difficult days when motivation felt impossibly low. "Everyone has bad training days," Elena told him one Saturday morning, after David complained about a particularly difficult run earlier that week where he had struggled to complete even half his planned distance. "The trick isn't avoiding bad days completely, because you can't. The trick is not letting one bad day convince you to quit the entire plan." By the 4th month of training, David's body had transformed noticeably. He had lost almost 15 kilograms, the weight loss wasn't really his main focus anymore, since simply feeling stronger and more capable had become far more rewarding than any number on a scale. He could now comfortably run distances that would have seemed completely impossible 5 months earlier, distances of 8 or 9 kilometers without needing to stop and walk. However, marathon training rarely proceeds in a perfectly straight line, and David's journey was no exception. During the 5th month, while attempting to increase his weekly running distance too quickly, ignoring Marcus's repeated warnings about gradual progression, David injured his knee during a particularly ambitious Saturday run. The pain started as a dull ache but quickly became sharp enough that he had to stop completely, unable to continue running even slowly. A visit to a sports doctor confirmed David's fear, a mild but genuine knee injury, caused by increasing his training intensity too quickly without proper recovery time. The doctor recommended at least 3 weeks of complete rest from running, followed by a careful, gradual return to training. David felt devastated by this news. 3 weeks felt like an enormous setback, especially with the marathon now only 5 months away. He seriously considered giving up entirely, wondering if his body simply wasn't built for this kind of physical challenge, regardless of his determination. Elena, hearing about his injury, visited him during this difficult period, bringing him a book about famous marathon runners who had overcome significant injuries during their own training journeys. Every serious runner deals with setbacks eventually, she told him. Injuries, illness, difficult life circumstances, they happen to everyone eventually. What separates people who eventually succeed from people who give up isn't avoiding these setbacks completely. It's how they respond when setbacks inevitably happen. During his 3 weeks of forced rest, David used the time productively, researching proper training techniques, learning about the importance of gradual progression, strength training, and adequate recovery time, mistakes he hadn't fully understood before his injury. He also used the time to focus more carefully on his diet and general health habits, ensuring he would return to running as strong and prepared as possible. When David finally returned to training after his enforced break, he approached his recovery with newfound patience and discipline, following Marcus's guidance more carefully than before, increasing his distances gradually, listening carefully to his body's signals, resting when necessary instead of pushing through pain stubbornly like he previously had. Slowly, over the following 2 months, David's fitness returned, and eventually surpassed his pre-injury level. By the 7th month of training, he successfully completed his first 10-kilometer training run without any pain, a milestone that felt more significant to him than almost anything he had accomplished in years. Around this time, David's colleagues at work also started noticing changes in him, both physically and in his general demeanor. He seemed more energetic during long workdays, more confident in meetings, generally happier and more engaged with his surroundings than his coworkers remembered him being previously. "You look completely different lately," his colleague Sarah told him one afternoon during a coffee break. "What's your secret?" David explained his marathon training, somewhat shyly at first, unsure how his colleagues would react to such an ambitious personal goal. To his surprise, several coworkers expressed genuine interest and admiration, and 2 of them, inspired by his story, even started their own modest exercise routines shortly afterward. As the marathon date approached, David's training intensified further, following an increasingly demanding schedule designed by Marcus specifically for the final months before race day. He ran during early mornings before work, during weekday evenings, and completed increasingly longer distances during weekend sessions with the running club, building up gradually toward distances approaching the actual marathon length. The longest training run before the actual event was a demanding 32-kilometer route through hilly terrain outside the city, completed exactly 1 month before race day. David finished this training run completely exhausted, his legs aching severely, questioning seriously whether he would actually manage the full marathon distance successfully. But Elena, running alongside him for much of that difficult training session, reassured him that feeling this exhausted during peak training was completely normal, and that a proper reduction in training intensity during the final weeks before the marathon, something runners called tapering, would allow his body to recover fully and perform at its best on race day itself. The final 3 weeks before the marathon involved gradually reducing training volume, allowing David's tired body proper time to heal and rebuild strength before the actual event. During this period, David found himself feeling unexpectedly nervous, questioning his preparation constantly, worrying about various potential problems that could occur during the actual race itself, weather conditions, unexpected injuries, simply running out of energy partway through the demanding 26-mile course. The night before the marathon, David could barely sleep, his mind constantly returning to memories from the past 10 months, that first embarrassing run around his block, Marcus's encouraging words after his difficult first Saturday session, Elena's friendship and advice throughout his journey, the disappointment of his injury, and the determination that eventually brought him back stronger than before. Race morning arrived cold and clear, ideal conditions for marathon running according to Marcus. David arrived early at the starting area, joining thousands of other runners, a mixture of serious athletes and beginners like himself, all preparing for the demanding challenge ahead. He spotted Elena nearby, and they exchanged nervous, excited smiles before making their way toward their respective starting positions, based on their expected finishing times. The race began with an enormous crowd of runners moving forward together, the atmosphere electric with excitement and nervous energy. David settled into a comfortable pace during the early kilometers, remembering Marcus's repeated advice about starting conservatively, avoiding the common beginner mistake of running too quickly during the initial excitement, only to suffer severely during the race's later stages. The first half of the marathon passed relatively smoothly, David's training clearly paying off as he maintained a steady, controlled pace through the city streets, encouraged by supportive crowds gathered along the route, cheering enthusiastically for every runner, regardless of their speed or experience level. However, as David approached the 30-kilometer mark, roughly 3/4 through the race, exhaustion began settling into his legs more seriously than during any of his training runs. His pace slowed noticeably, and doubt crept into his thoughts, wondering seriously whether he possessed enough remaining energy to complete the final, demanding kilometers ahead. It was during this particularly difficult stretch that David unexpectedly spotted his wife and 2 children standing among the crowd, holding a handmade sign with his name written across it, cheering loudly and enthusiastically as he approached. David felt an overwhelming surge of emotion seeing his family's support, momentarily forgetting his physical exhaustion completely. "You've got this, Dad," his 10-year-old daughter shouted, waving energetically. This unexpected moment of encouragement provided David with renewed determination during precisely the moment he needed it most. He continued forward, his pace still slower than earlier in the race, but his resolve strengthened considerably by his family's unexpected appearance along the difficult route. The final kilometers of the marathon proved to be, without question, the most physically and mentally challenging experience David had ever faced. His entire body screamed with exhaustion, every step requiring significant conscious effort and determination. But he continued forward regardless, remembering every difficult training session, every early morning run, every moment of doubt he had successfully overcome throughout the preceding 10 months. As David approached the final kilometer, the finish line finally becoming visible in the distance, he felt an unexpected surge of emotional energy overcome his physical exhaustion completely. He picked up his pace slightly during these final moments, crossing the finish line with his arms raised triumphantly, tears mixing with sweat on his exhausted but genuinely joyful face. His official finishing time was 4 hours and 23 minutes, a time that would mean nothing to most experienced marathon runners, but represented, for David personally, an achievement more significant than almost anything else he had accomplished throughout his entire life. Elena, who had finished slightly earlier, found him shortly after he crossed the finish line, embracing him warmly. "You did it," she said, genuinely emotional herself. "I'm so incredibly proud of you, David." David's family joined him minutes later, his wife embracing him tightly despite his sweaty, exhausted state, his children excitedly asking countless questions about the race, proudly showing him photographs and videos they had captured of him running past various points along the course. That evening, exhausted but deeply satisfied, David reflected on his incredible journey over the preceding 10 months. He thought about the frightened, unhealthy man who had struggled desperately to complete even a single lap around his neighborhood block, and compared him to the man who had just successfully completed a full 26-mile marathon. The transformation felt almost unbelievable, yet entirely real. In the months following the marathon, David's relationship with exercise and health continued evolving positively. He didn't stop running after achieving his initial goal. Instead, running had become a permanent, valued part of his daily routine, something that brought him genuine joy and satisfaction rather than feeling like an obligation or chore. He remained active within his local running club, eventually taking on a mentorship role himself, guiding new beginners through their own challenging early training experiences, offering the same patient encouragement Marcus had once offered him during his most discouraging early sessions. "Everyone starts somewhere," David often told nervous newcomers to the beginner group, remembering his own humbling first experience. The only real requirement for eventual success is simply refusing to quit permanently, even when quitting feels tempting. A year after his first marathon, David successfully completed a second one, achieving a significantly improved finishing time, a clear testament to his continued dedication and improved training knowledge. But more importantly than any specific running achievement, David's entire approach toward life had fundamentally shifted. He approached challenges with considerably more confidence and resilience, understanding deeply now that meaningful change rarely happens instantly, but rather through consistent, patient effort applied steadily over extended periods of time. And that's the end of today's story, the marathon. I really like this story because I think it shows something important. Real change usually isn't dramatic or instant. It happens slowly, through small, consistent efforts, even when progress feels painfully slow or setbacks happen along the way. Before you go, think about this. Is there something in your own life you've wanted to change, but felt too intimidated to start? What would your first small step look like? Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Anna, and this is the podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care, and keep practicing your English.